like to start off by having Jared share some of the real most significant misconceptions that you're hearing about from families about standardized testing.
I think the first thing that sometimes is confusing and really has been for the last 4 or 5 years since COVID has been the idea that test optional equals test blind. I think we need to be really careful not to conflate those two ideas, different things. And so test blind means we really don't care about tests. And I think schools are few and far between that fall into that boat. And you can certainly talk more about that. As opposed to test optional, which is if you've got good scores, we probably want to see them. We want to see your best. We want to see what it is that you have to offer us academically. And there's really few ways better to do that than through great SAT or ACT scores. It's one of the only remaining way for colleges and universities to compare students from one high school to another high school, from one state to another state. And so I think that's one misconception, is just the idea of test blind being test optional. I see that misconception maybe starting to diminish as most schools have now gone back to wanting tests and really announcing that as their policy.
I agree. I mean, from an admissions perspective, when I talk with my team, that with their admissions experience from Duke, UNC, Columbia, Oxford, et cetera, we think about how to evaluate a student from their admissions experience. When they're admission officers and they're evaluating students, we have to control for grade inflation, and we have to estimate, is the kid going to do well in college if accepted? So when we're guiding our students, we help the families understand that test optional is not really a thing you want to exercise unless you have to. And in some cases you do, and that's okay.
I think there's no substitute for taking full-length, authentic practice tests. So do a diagnostic ACT. Let's use the most realistic test we have available, which right now the ACT, as of our conversation right now, the ACT's published 4 of them. Let's do the same thing with an SAT, and let's use data. Let's not just go by feel, although feeling and that subjective sense of like this felt right or that felt better, that was harder, that matters. So does the data. And so let's do the tests, let's do them in an authentic environment. And so for some students that might be starting with diagnostics January of sophomore year, and for others, it might be doing those same diagnostics 10 months later as a junior in October, November. Regardless though of when you start, let's start with the 2 diagnostics, and then let's make the informed decision, let's have the conversation, and then let's do some form of instruction.
What kinds of score gains can they expect realistically?
It's partly a function of where the student is starting. So if you come to us with an SAT and your diagnostic is 870, then of course we can aspire to get 300, 400 point increases, and that happens a lot of the time. If you're coming to us with a 1410 and your goal is much more, let's get into the 1500s, let's get to a 1550, 140 point increase could be absolutely a life-changing increase for you. So it's a little bit of a function of where you start and kind of coming up with realistic expectations and goals, and that's through conversation with us. I think we can help develop that. I think the other part of this, in terms of setting goals, is also thinking about what am I putting into the process? Coaches aren't trying to close doors. Coaches are trying to open doors to athletes they want. And so if they get data from the student that shows they've taken a test and shows their performance level, that's just creating another pathway towards success for eventual admissions.
One of the things we found to be interesting, and it does vary by sport, tennis is one of the ones that begins very early. So when we were at the tennis combine for the John McEnroe Tennis Academy, of which we're partnered, the Brown coach shared that she's looking at 9th grade students. And what's hard about that is it's unfair, right? I don't like necessarily that a 14-year-old is being evaluated at that young age for such a big decision, but the system is the system, right? And so if we can optimize in middle school, we're more ready for high school. If we can start to cultivate that confidence and knowing how to talk to coaches and knowing what the variables are, you're ready.
Yeah, I want to add into that, Tony. That reminds me, I've spent 6 years on the collegiate soccer level, so coaching at both Harvard and Yale. And I would say, as you just said, the one thing we always ask recruits or potential recruits right away is, do you have SAT scores? Do you have ACT scores? And that's a very clear line. If you've got above a certain number, then we can continue these conversations, and the head coach will invest the time in you if we feel that you are the right fit. And if not, that's okay. Just for those institutions, we can't take our time, and we don't want to waste your time as a student athlete.
How do we consider what is a good score?
I would say, from my perspective as an educator, a good score is one that you've achieved by maximizing your effort and achieving a goal that we've talked about ahead of time that was aspirational. So it's not a modest goal. We're not trying to undersell your goals to try to make sure everybody achieves the goal, but one that's thought about, that's discussed ahead of time, and that you can look at and say, I did my best. I did every practice test available. I did all the materials. I was proactive in my approach, and I achieved this score. Generally, that equates to a good score.
We found a strong relationship between test scores and 8th grade algebra, right? And so that's been an interesting finding for us. And so this idea of, don't worry about middle school, we'll focus more on high school, we're kind of starting to say it's worth putting an effort and energy to practice and have healthy routines early on so that you have a strong foundation, so you have optionality. And so a good test prep program like Peak is going to help you ensure you're getting your theoretical maximum score. You can be confident in it, and then you can move on. Because if you harp on it for too long, it can become really stressful. What you want to do is put in your effort, get your best, and then keep moving. What are the qualities that you look for when you're referring families to help them navigate? Because college now, it's almost $100,000 a year. The stakes are high. The future of work might seem intimidating with AI and the shifting landscape of jobs. There's so much that's feeling like heavy to families right now. And so to me, the group you surround yourself with to inform you as a parent is more critical now than ever. How do you make that distinction?
I think number one, being aware of the holistic picture. Certainly you at Novella Prep do a great job of that. That is your job, is to figure out the whole student, to learn the whole student so that you can help best position them. There's plenty of people in the world who are great at taking SATs and ACTs. When you're an adult and you've been around this stuff your whole life, it's not magic to be able to get a good score yourself. But I think being an exceptional, a transcendent teacher and coach in anything you do means that you truly love education. You love being an educator. And so I think that's a second thing for whatever level you're looking at, whether it's SAT, ACT, or a different level. I think that's important.
When it comes to neurodivergent learners, we have seen in recent years a rise in the diagnosis of neurodivergent learners, ADHD, autism spectrum, dyslexia, et cetera. And we're finding that some of that is because there are more diagnostic tools available. Some of it is due to more ready access to it. But there could be some impact as well due to digital and distraction with social media causing challenges with attention spans. That represents a certain population of the students that we serve and for which we have expertise. But in the case of standardized test prep, if you are a neurodivergent learner and maybe you have a 504 IEP in school, how do you approach that from a test prep perspective? And also test day itself, right? How do you ensure that whatever accommodations are there for them?
Absolutely, and we honor those accommodations in our practice testing program as well. So on any given Saturday or Sunday, we'll have some students taking 1.5 time, double time, breaks as needed. There's a lot of different accommodations, and yeah, I think certainly with the way the SAT works now, where you're taking the test digitally, you select what you've been given. So on every practice test, all you have to do is click a few buttons. We make sure the student is selecting the right things, and then it's all done for you, and you just follow along with the plan. And so absolutely, you practice that, and you practice it, and you practice it, and when you get to test day, it should not feel unfamiliar to you.
I wanted to ask a new question about advanced placement. From an admissions perspective, AP scores, the test at the end of the year, score of 1 to 5, 5 is the highest, is alongside SAT and ACT a critical part of admissions, particularly for elite universities. And it used to be really to try to get course credit as well, but really now it's more of another admissions tool, a way to stamp out grade inflation and a way to be more ready. That's something you also prepare students for, correct?
Absolutely. We love the APs. I think it's partially because a lot of our teachers taught AP courses themselves for many years. And so for those of us who are no longer teaching, like I taught AP European and AP World History for the first 13 years of my professional career, we love those courses. It's full of content. It's intellectually invigorating. It's exciting. So that's, I'd say, in addition to SAT and ACT, I think our AP work is our favorite to do. And I think that shows with the work we do with students.
So if a family has the luxury of an earlier start, you work on the SAT and ACT before the APs really ramp up as juniors and seniors, because typically in 10th grade, it's 1 or 2 APs, typically at most. in junior and senior year, if you're looking to have a heavy AP load, if you have that luxury, you get the standardized testing done before then. And if you have to, you and our teams have experience working in and around complex student schedules, right?
There are often 10th graders do one AP, that's dipping their toes into it, and it's often a very intense AP world, or at least in the New York area, that's what it is. In some of the other parts of the country where we work with students, it might be a different, like an AP human geography, but usually it's one. And then I'm sure, as you recommend, rigor of course load really matters. And so we see students taking a lot, and that's something we love to provide. And I think it helps when students want to push themselves. It makes it really enjoyable to work with them.
So it sounds like, as we're saying, standardized tests are back. It's important to prepare. You're not on your own going to get your highest theoretical score. It can be a variable that you can leverage to increase your probability of admission. It can be a variable that you end up setting aside as not helping you, but you know that you did all that you could, and it's worth that endeavor. And it's something to begin that discussion earlier to kind of arm yourself with that knowledge. And when in doubt, ask.